Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their callings and industries. Today, we are thrilled to have with us a power player in the world of financial services and workplace culture. From commercial fishing in Alaska at age 15, if you can believe that, to founding a mission-driven recruiting company, Stephen Perry's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Imagine, if you will, walking away from some dollar annual salary to follow a faith-driven calling. That's exactly what Stephen did in 23 when he founded the Well Recruiting Solutions. With over 17 years in financial services, Stephen has guided hundreds of advisors, conducting thousands of interviews, and experienced both the highs of making six-figure donations to the lows of bounced rent checks. Stephen's unique blend of entrepreneurial grit and financial acumen and passion for serving others, makes him a powerhouse in the industry. Now, before we roll that intro, please share this with your friends and networks. I know many are going to enjoy this conversation. There's two other things you could do. If you could be so kind as to give 5am Podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player, we'll thank you for that. And thank you to those that have ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am Podcast and brought us a few cups of coffee this week and last. We do appreciate your support. Now, if you want to join those early risers who've bought into the mission to support the mission of 5am Podcast, you are welcome to join us and help others seize their days. Now, let's roll that intro. Stephen Perry, welcome to the 5am Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a delight to have you. Now, we're going to start talking about life and stuff and things, as you do on these podcasts. But Stephen, your journey from commercial fisherman to financial services is fascinating. How did those early experiences shape your approach to business and life?
Well, first off, again, I want to thank you for creating this forum that, I get to have a conversation with you on. I know it's a lot of work that goes into this, and it's a team effort. So I don't take that lightly, and I appreciate you inviting me on here.
Oh,
Oh,
100%. Yes.
yeah. So commercial fishing certainly taught me how to work hard. You can definitely get through a 100-hour work week. And that was new to me as a 14-year-old kid. And so I always tell the story, like I got to the end of that fishing season and I could do math. And I figured out, how much salmon we caught that year and how much the price of salmon was. And I started adding that up. I'm like, man, we made a lot of good money. And then I looked at my paycheck. I'm like, someone made a lot of good money. And I think it was the owner. And so I want to be the owner. And obviously I didn't know at that time all of the things that go into owning, but it was that later that year actually that I started my first company that I ran all the way through high school and college. And I learned a lot. I definitely learned how to work hard. I also learned how not to treat people. I've learned leadership and all kinds of incredible things, but that really was a pivotal moment that just said, God's given me the gift of, stewarding businesses. And so that started early. Now, I'll tell you the other part of the story is that my family, my dad worked and my mom stayed at home and raised me and my sister. And they spent about all of their money sending my sister and I to the best private Christian school in Anchorage, Alaska. And so we didn't have a lot of things we wanted growing up. We had everything we needed, but not a lot of things we wanted. And so if I wanted to play basketball, if I wanted to be on the track team, if I wanted to have the team basketball shoes, go to camp, new clothes when I went back to school, I had to pay for it. And no one was willing to pay a 14, 15-year-old kid the kind of money that I needed or wanted to do all of those things. And so that was really the driving force behind that entrepreneurial beginning.
Wow, fascinating. It is true that, was it necessity is the mother of invention?
Yep, 100%.
So what is your advice thinking back to your age when you were in those teen years, and now today you maybe see teens in your neighborhood or your church? What do you see in that generation that you feel maybe called to speak into?
Yeah. So great question. I see, so let me fast forward a little bit to my career where I spent many years interviewing and recruiting people who wanted to make an entrepreneurial leap into specifically financial services. And so many times I sat there, in my office, across the couch from a gentleman or a woman who like wanted with everything that they had to make that leap and to step into their full potential that, that's allowed by being an entrepreneur. And at that point in their life, though, they had credit card debt, student loans, they had kids, young kids at home, they had a mortgage, people depending on them. And they were in a position where they couldn't risk, in their mind, they couldn't take the risk to go into an entrepreneurial venture. They knew the long-term payoff was phenomenal. They knew that they would eventually make it, but they just didn't have enough runway to do it. And then for those who were able to do that, the sacrifices that they had to make to be successful when they now had their counterparts, right? A spouse or children, where they were having to sacrifice any stage of that, like young children or grade school kids where they're missing their school events, because it takes that to launch a business, several years of that. So I share that to go back to my advice is like, yes, it might be cool to go to basketball camps all summer. It might be cool to backpack through Europe or travel or whatever. A lot of people think like they want to have that, you know, early 20s experience. You are trading that experience. You're trading those things that you probably will not want a whole lot in the future for what you really want in the future and the ability to have a lifetime of freedom. So take that risk, take that jump, get into sales or start a business as young as you possibly can so that you can then have the rest of your life to enjoy doing all of those other things that you're going to want to do.
Absolutely. And you've obviously interviewed a large list of people. And when you're, and maybe this comes down to some spiritual discernment, but also it's knowledge and it's experience, it being in the trenches. What are some of those qualities that people are coming to the table with? And you say, wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's not a good one.
Yeah, great question. So I look for kind of two, three things. The first thing I look for is a track record of success. Like people who enter entrepreneurialism, that's probably not going to be the first place that they're successful. Like that's a big leap. And so, whether that was academically, whether it was they were brought up in a tough childhood with a single parent or no parents, and they had to raise themselves or raise siblings. Maybe they had to go to work the second they turned 14 years old to provide for their family. Maybe they were in a military family that moved every 3 years and they still were able to get phenomenal grades and be in student government. Maybe they were the captain of their sports teams and scholarships and different things like that. Like I need to see a track record of success. And that's, early on. Obviously, if they're later in their career, right, then career success, family success, things like that. Right. So that's one thing that I'm looking for. And then the second thing to look for is a thread of discontent, is what we call it, meaning that they're not able to get to where they want with their current path. And so they know they have to make a decision. And it's not because they just want to, but it's they have to. And so I said maybe three, right? The last one is that clear vision of what their best life looks like. What are they trying to get to? And in tandem with that thread of discontent, if they can clearly articulate both of those things and they have a track record of success, like that's a really strong start and in often cases enough to get it done.
Yeah. So what about if you had an opportunity to speak to parents? We've had a couple of parenting conversations in the last little while here on 5 a.m. podcast. What thinking to parents if there was someone that actually wanted some advice on helping to mentor and raise up their children, what would you say to them about those maybe rambunctious teenage boys or girls that are unsettled, that are they're chomping at the bit to do something?
How honest do you want me to be?
Oh, be very honest. Let it tell like it is, brother.
Yeah. So, my experience in school, I'm going to share this because I think it will resonate with some parents. My experience in school was I never studied. I never had homework because I got it done the second I got assigned in class. I had some teachers that loved me and some teachers that hated me. Some years I spent a lot of time in the principal's office. I had more varsity letters than anyone in my entire class. I had more scholarship money than the rest of my class combined. Yet the last bell of my senior year, I was in the principal's office and they were telling me why they were going to basically kick me out of school and not graduate me for the reasons that I did not fit the model of the current education system. And frankly, if you look at the majority of entrepreneurial successful people, A lot of them didn't. And so if you're finding yourself parenting a child like, that's not indicative of what's going to happen in their future. If the school system is saying, hey, this kid doesn't fit in, they don't pay attention, they're rambunctious, they don't sit down, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So be encouraged in that. And then in addition to that, I just want to share what my parents did that was amazing, right? So there wasn't a lot of extra go around. But they did everything they could to support me. And so one of my businesses, my main business was driveway seal coating, asphalt seal coating, about the messiest thing you can possibly do. And my mom, her beloved minivan, let me drive that thing all over town with buckets of tar in the minivan that got all over the house, ruined how many washing machines, how many pairs of clothes. And she barely said a peep because she was supportive of whatever I needed to do to figure out and be successful in business. Like I trashed their house. I trashed their vehicles. I trashed the mudroom in the house. And God bless them. They didn't say a thing. They just encouraged me and like, how can I help? Who can we introduce? They're proud of me. And so I would just say, having that spirit, the big picture, what really matters, I would encourage parents in that too.
Well, that sounds like you were really driven to accomplish personal goals in that span of years. And I think most parents should be so lucky as to have someone who is driven to rise above the expectation that's on teenagers. But I've got to ask you about this faith driven calling that led you to start the Well Recruiting Solutions. Can you talk more about this pivotal moment and how it influenced your business philosophy?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for asking, Michael. So a handful of years ago, I went through an exercise where I created what at that point was called my stand. That was relative to the conversation, but I would say, my identity, my life mission statement, and that is that I am a bold, encouraging, and generous follower of Jesus Christ who will help fund billions of dollars to grow God's kingdom by leading others to live radically generous lives. And that's who I am. That's what I feel like God has gifted me to do in this life. And so it became very clear at a large celebratory meeting at a fancy 5-star hotel, sitting right next to my wife, that I was not going to be able to move any more forward in my calling in the current career that I was in. And for me to tarry any longer was going to be disobedient. And so, we began the process of trying to figure out what is next. And I knew it meant I needed to leave me in an executive position and move to owning my own business. And so I thought that meant buying a business in the same career. So it wasn't going to be that drastic. And so I proceeded to talk and visit with different firms, got really close to buying a firm, told my boss I'd be leaving in a few months. The next week that deal fell through. The next week I got fired after 17 in that business, at that company. And so I literally left with nothing. No plan, no nothing. And I would wake up Monday morning and pray and fast and say, Lord, what do you want me to look at as a business this week? And he would give me a name. He would give me a project that I would run that week, and I would run with that and do whatever it was, talk to whoever he told me to do, get on whatever plane I needed to and go visit somebody. And then the next Monday I would pray and fast and he would say yay or nay. And that continued until I found myself in India at a Bible college that we support there. The current project I was sharing with somebody there, and they were asking me questions. And 30 minutes later, I took a breath and I realized, okay, if I can be that excited halfway across the world in the middle of abject poverty, where these people are getting, like, they have family members who have been killed for their faith. They've been kicked out of their towns because of their faith. And I'm excited about that. Then that's God's calling for the next season of my life.
Wow. So that decision then, did you get people asking you to have your head examined
Yeah, I'll totally.
or did you have a lot of support?
I mean, I
Yeah.
like,
Can you?
yeah, I had lots of people like, what are you doing? But I mean, just like in school, not a lot of the teachers didn't understand me. In my professional environment, I had great relationships with everyone, but they knew, like, all right, Steve's creative. He's, a little bit out there on some ideas and some things. And so it did not catch a lot of people by surprise.
Gotcha. So, what advice would you give to others that maybe are thinking of doing some career cliff diving
Yeah.
or something like that, taking that leap of faith?
Some advice that I got at the same time, we go to a church that has 10 different locations, and we'd gone to one location for several years, and we were thinking about moving to a different location, which was a little bit closer to our house. And some advice I got in that time was to make sure that I had like an anchor verse or, a word from God that like we knew without a doubt that we could, when we questioned it in the future, we could come back to that and say, nope, we know why we made that decision. I would share the same thing with this, in that be clear that God is calling you to do it. There'll probably be confirmation with your spouse in that. It would be very difficult if your spouse is not on board and you guys aren't aligned in that. And I would caution you severely against making that jump. If you feel called to do it, but your spouse does not have that confirmation, and then write it down, like why you felt called. Be able to articulate that story, because you're going to need it when you wake up one day and realize, or many days and realize, oh my gosh, I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost sounds like that spinning top that they had in that movie. It escapes me at the moment. Induction or whatever that. There was that one movie where they were traveling through dimensions and they always had that top to spin to see which dimension they were in. I'm probably getting it wrong and someone's listening and saying it's that movie, but I don't know what the title is. What one title I do know is your book is called The Capacity Model. And can you break down this concept and explain how it applies to both personal and professional growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So the premise of the book is that we all experience stress, and that stress is actually a gift. And most people don't look at it that way, but it's a gift because it's life telling you it's time to grow. You've maximized your capacity. And so, to break down the model quickly, our capacity, or our ability to handle everything life throws at us up until the point we begin to experience stress, is built on three different pillars: our education, or our learning, the habits that we have in place, and then the relationships, the people that we're in relation with. And so, however good of a job we've done building up each of those pillars and bolstering them, making them stronger, at the higher our capacity ceiling is, the more that we get handle thrown at us to begin to experience stress. And so I dive into what are our responses to stress? Do we have a breakdown? Do we go through the cycle of breakdown, or do we have a breakthrough? And then I go into like all the subcategories in growing our education pillar, growing our habits pillar, growing our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And we need those. We need to intentionally think about those pillars, those foundational things in our life that we can build upon. So if somebody's listening and they're thinking, I need some pillars, this isn't something that I've been cognizant of, but I know that I have to make a change, where do they start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have the book about as cheap as possible on Amazon. So the capacity model, how it builds your best life. But so you could read it, ebook, physical book, ebook, Audible. It's on my YouTube channel too, Real Steve Perry. The whole thing is on there in every chapter in audio. So you can listen to any of those. But really the premise is looking at, hey, I am feeling stressed right now. What is causing me stress? And then thinking to yourself, like, all right, maybe it's I'm not making enough money. Maybe it's, I'm not getting along with my spouse. Maybe it's I'm feeling really bored. Maybe it's like I'm overweight and unhealthy. Whatever that is, it's pretty easy to identify then. All right, what is one piece of education? What's one thing I could learn that would help me improve that? What is one habit I could put in place that would help improve that? Or who is somebody that I could get into relationship with, or better relationship with, that would improve that situation? And then which one of those three things is going to have the biggest impact the quickest? Great, let's do that. And then, so, hey, my relationship with my spouse is not going very well. Okay, well, I could learn more about marriage. I could, or read a book about marriage. I could, start going on dates every week with my spouse, or I could get a marriage counselor. Well, I could do all those things, but man, let's start with dates. That's super easy. Let's put it in the calendar and let's just date my wife again and start with that.
Yeah, that sounds like the 80-20 rule
Yeah.
is coming into play.
Yep. I definitely talk about
We're
that in
working
there.
on these pillars. I wanted Yeah, the 80-20 rule, ladies and gentlemen, is key in getting those lists of criteria to get your life on track or your career where you need it to be. But I want to ask, thinking back to your background, it includes actually leading top professional financial advisory teams. What kind of leadership principles have you found most effective in motivating those men or women who are working for you, and maybe it's relatable to other people who are going down that entrepreneurial road?
Yeah. Um, I can give a couple hacks. John Maxwell writes lots of phenomenal. I mean, there's a million amazing books. John Maxwell does an amazing job on that. But a couple hacks I would give. Number one, this is so good for you and so good for your team. But if you'll And here's where you do this. If you wake up in the morning, you're just like, I'm on the wrong side of the bed. Like something happens bad right at the beginning of the day and you just know it's going down the wrong. Send 3 encouraging text messages. And if you want to be proactive about this, send 3 encouraging text messages every single day. It is impossible to have a crappy day after you do that, and you will not believe the feedback you get every single day from people that will frankly encourage you back. And I find as a leader, if you can do that genuinely with your team, it's an amazing way to build up credibility with them and then just love on them and help them grow. Second thing I would say in leading a team, I've had a lot of times where I've been inserted into a situation or organization where I'm now by title the senior leader, but there's other leaders that have been there a long time before me, and bring them along for the journey. Like, do not be autocratic. Do not tell people how it's going to be, but instead involve the other leaders in the decision. Frankly, if at all possible, allow them to make the leadership decisions because they're the ones who have the relationships with the people on the front line and, the majority of the people there anyways. And so if it's their idea, they're going to do a lot more to promote that and get buy-in with the organization. And like you don't need to take the credit for it anyways. And so those would be 2 quick things I would do.
Yeah, well, that's great. So, can you share an example, maybe how your faith has guided you through difficult business decisions and what was the outcome?
I'll share a fun story
Sure.
along this. So when I lived in Lubbock, Texas for a couple of years. And when I got there, I realized that, about everyone kind of grew up in church there. And so, it was an opportunity where I could first be a lot more bold in my faith in the workplace. And I was the boss. So we opened up staff meeting every single day in prayer. And there's a lot of cool things you can do in prayer. You can encourage people, you can confess things, you can align people. Your heart can be shown in prayer. And as you're trying to build relationships, that's a great way to do that, to show your faith. But one of the things we did, Michael, was we prayed every single morning that our organization would be so successful that we couldn't take the credit for it. Like we would have to point to God as the source for that success. And we did that very openly. So certainly everyone on the leadership team that was there every day knew we did that. And many times everyone in the whole organization would be able to hear those things. And God really showed off. He allowed us 2 years in a row to win more national trophies out of 115 offices, more than any office in the history of the company, 2 years in a row, 170-year history of the company, like record breaking. And, when you get up on stage and get those trophies, you get to brag on God and say, this is what we prayed every single day. And so that was just a really cool, neat experience where, I don't know, that was a difficult situation. That was a great situation, but where God got all the credit from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. Well, and you're being a good steward not only of your spiritual wealth and power, but also of the physical side of interacting and serving clients correctly, right? It's been said, I think it was maybe Mr. Rothbard who said that price is an indicator of how well you're serving your clientele. Sorry, profit is an indicator of how well you're serving. Right. And Christianity is all about serving. I wanted to ask you, how do you foster maybe a culture of continuous learning and growth within your organization? And maybe what do you advise, let's say, firms that come to you? They're not only looking for staff, but they're looking for other inputs as well.
It does have to start at the top. And so you lead, whatever you're leading, if you are the top leader or, you're somewhere in the matrix, nobody, you can't expect anybody below you. And I hate that. I always try to turn the graph upside down, but it doesn't translate well, but whatever.
I got you.
They're not, they may do it, but they certainly aren't going to do it because you asked them to if you're not doing it. So when I, again, first got my first office where I was the managing partner, the boss, my coach, I sat down with him and he's like, all right, Steve, how many books are you going to read this year? And I'm like, oh, I'm ready for you. And mind you, I shared, like, I'd never read a book for anything all the way through high school, all the way through college, but I was ready. I knew he was going to ask me that. So I'm like, and my coach's name is Reed, by the way, just kind of random. How many books are you going to read? I said, I'm going to read 12 books this year. I'm going to read a book a month. Aren't you proud of me? And he's like, okay, well, someone at your level should probably be reading a book a week, but can we do like 2 books a month? Can we agree on that? And I was like, holy smokes, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but okay. And now, fortunately, I had an office that was a 2 hour one way drive that I went to once a week. And so I was able to listen to a book about one a week with that drive. But that's where it starts. Like leaders are readers, so cliche.
Yes.
You got to do it. You got to do it. And I would say from that is naturally going to come stories and observations and inputs. And it's just going to come out of your mouth. Just like when you're reading the Bible all the time or always in prayer, you're like, hey, I just read this in John, or I was just praying and God just revealed this to me, right? I just read this book and this is what, and they're like, well, what book was that? And then they're going to ask you, and then you're going to give books. And then, it just bubbles up and builds this culture, sometimes very quickly, where people are
Absolutely.
grabbing outside inputs to help them get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say for whether there's bosses or CEOs or whoever listening to this conversation, hopefully they are, of how you approach your office and your staff is actually how they're going to approach it. If they see that the boss is caring about them, texting them to say, hey, hope you're having a good day. Hopefully you're not stuck in the mud. Let me know if you are. But if there's that free flow of perceived interaction between the boss category and the worker bees, they're going to reflect what they see in the managing class.
Yeah.
That interaction that you're talking about, the texting, just having those meaningful touches of points of contact, maybe I should say, keep you out of the HR office. Don't touch people, but send them.
And literally,
I
I
say
got in
that from
trouble for that.
personal experience.
Like, I was so
Yeah.
committed to it. I literally had letters in my file because I texted. I'm like, I don't care. It's so important. I have to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the good ones will know that you care and you're doing it because you're trying to not just push them out of the nest, but teach them to fly, I think is a good way to put it. So as we're getting close to the end of our conversation, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah. Super active on LinkedIn. Steve Perry, the Well Recruiting Solutions. I'm on Instagram too. Not quite as active, but repicking that up. And then
Gotcha.
I've got a fun gift. If anyone happens to be hiring or doing interviews for their jobs, I created a cool giveaway. Top 10 creative interview questions to make sure you get the best hire every time. And that's at hirethewell.com.
Awesome. That's really good. I've got to ask you about as people are looking for staff in this day and age, what is the biggest pain point that you're coming across for companies?
Real time, we just posted a job on LinkedIn and it went live at 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. So not really prime time for job applicants. By 8 o'clock Monday morning, so like, I don't know, 36-ish hours, with half
Yeah.
those hours being like late night, we had over 700 applications.
Wow.
700. If you're in the company, you're not equipped to like process all of that to find it. So digital environment that we live in, which solved the problem initially where people can find candidates easier than they ever could before, is now, and not just recently, but it's just getting worse and worse, is now creating information overload, actually completely cripples a hiring department, or a company that may have one HR person and like they're doing all the other HR stuff and supposed to sift through that to find the right applicant. So that's one of the hugest problems we're seeing right now.
How about a parting thought for those professionals who they're not looking to go down the entrepreneurial road, but they're actually looking to level up with a different company?
Say what I'm finding as we're hiring for people and we are even hiring internally. I mean, we've grown to over 40 people on our team in the last 15 months. Mission alignment, I think, is more important than ever. So finding a company who's done a really good job of aligning with their mission. And if you find yourself in a company like that right now, I just find that's going to give you an extra 20%, an extra 30% of oomph, of effort, of focus, of getting better because you truly, really care. You don't have to question. You're not taking that extra time at night and questioning, is what I'm really doing making a difference? Because the longer you go with that thought, the more it robs your productivity, and your company, like they're paying you to be productive. And so if you can really align your mission, who you feel like you're gifted to be and your calling in life with what you get to do vocationally, that's really where the acceleration is going to be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Stephen, it was a phenomenal conversation. I appreciate you joining me here at 5 a.m. podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor. And yeah, this was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'd like to chat more. I've actually got to go for my bike ride. I need to get like 45 to 60 minutes in on my road bike today. And so yeah, time's ticking away and it's the afternoon. It's warmed up and my adrenal glands are already getting ready to go for climbing that hill or something. But thank you so much. It was great, Stephen, to have you on.
My pleasure. You're welcome.
Good. Well, and I want to thank our viewers too. We appreciate you joining in on this conversation. If you haven't already, of course, we like the like and the subscribe, but better than that, share this with your friends. I'm sure there's a name of somebody rolling around in your head. You're like, wow, this guy needs, or this gal needs to listen to Steve and Michael talk today. So send it out. They'll be happy you did. I'm sure of it. And we appreciate all the love of the likes, shares, and subscribes. One more thing, if you can give 5am podcast a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player, we would appreciate it. And as I mentioned at the top, a big thanks to all those that have gone over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast and helped out with getting us some coffee cups last week and this week. We appreciate it. Thank you all for your support. And until next time, make sure to seize your day and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets. We all need that orange and red light spectrum into those eyeballs in the morning and the evening. So thanks everybody for being here and have yourself a great day.